Hey, welcome to Socialism for All. Today's date is July 16, 2021, and I'm still working on some of those longer audiobooks that I talked about. In the meantime, this weekend, I'm going to do a bunch of Hanging with the Sock Dem Gang videos, doing some critiques, commentaries, and responses to Kyle Kulinski, Humanist Report, channels like that. If you like this video, please click like and subscribe, and consider supporting us on Patreon. There's a link to Patreon in the video description. Okay, so I'm going to do a bunch of these this weekend. This is the first video that I am putting up. As I've mentioned, as the summer was starting, I am having a really busy summer, so I just don't have as much time to make content for the channel. I also really haven't been watching much in the news. I've been that busy. So I have not screened these videos. I basically just went to Secular Talk and clicked on the Channels tab, and I looked at the channels that Kyle Kulinski is promoting. They're all, kind of that social democratic, anti-socialist, hanging on to the edge of imperialism, Scandinavia type of thing that they promote over in that political ecosphere. So, got some interesting channels that we're going to be covering. Some of them are first-time things for S4A. Let's get into it with two Secular Talk videos right off the bat. Let's start with this first one titled How Partisan Politics Gives People Brainworms. I haven't watched any of these, going in totally cold.
So we have some new numbers that just came out on the withdrawal from Afghanistan, and this is really interesting to me. So I want to give you the partisan breakdown to show you how much of a mind virus tribalism and partisan politics can be. So Political Morning Consult poll that just came out. 76% of Democrats support Biden's full withdrawal from Afghanistan. Now, by the way, it's actually, the media is talking about it as if it's a full withdrawal. It's not really a full withdrawal. There's going to be some contractors left on the ground, most likely, and a couple boots on the ground to help train the Afghanistan military. So it's not really a full withdrawal, but the media is talking about it as if it's a full withdrawal. So when they ask the question, people think it's a full withdrawal.
Okay, so not a criticism, but just a comment on that. I had seen headlines in passing to that effect, that it was a full withdrawal, like U.S. out of Afghanistan. I had the impression that it was a complete withdrawal. I did not have time to read the stories. I thought that that was interesting. And didn't the U.S. already do that? Like, didn't they scale down troops dramatically years ago? I don't, anyway, that's very interesting to me. I mean, it seemed like, of course, too good to be true when, you see the picture of Biden in the thumbnail and it's like, Biden announces U.S. out of Afghanistan. Well, yeah, okay, so I guess it is too good to be true. Continuing.
So 76% of Democrats support what they think is Biden's full withdrawal from Afghanistan. 59% of independents support a full withdrawal. 42% of Republicans support a full withdrawal. And by the way, the number of Republicans that are against the plan now is 43%. So 42% support Biden's full withdrawal, 43% oppose Biden's full withdrawal. Okay, that's a poll that just came out. Now we rewind to 2019, 2020, when Trump's still president, and he made a deal with the Taliban, and the media reported this as a deal to fully withdraw. Now, by the same token, it wasn't really a full withdrawal. He was going to keep some contractors on the ground and going to keep some boots on the ground to train the Afghanistan military. But again, the media talked about it as if the deal with the Taliban would lead to a full withdrawal. Okay, so at that time, when they polled it, 60% of Democrats supported Trump's deal to get out. 67% of Republicans supported Trump's deal to get out. So do you see the difference in the numbers there? If you tell a Democratic voter that a Democratic president wants to end the war, they support it by 16 points more than if you tell a Democratic voter that a Republican wants to get us out of war. I mean, that's devastating.
Okay. I'm not sure that it's devastating, and I'll explain why. I mean, overall, to the extent that Kyle's analysis or assertions are correct, that this is purely an issue of Democrats said it, therefore good, Republicans said it, therefore bad among Democrats, and then vice versa among Republicans. Surely there is some legitimacy to that. These are also slightly different points in time, and they are slightly different plans. Trump had also proposed in 2017 increasing troops. To be honest, I'm not sure what happened with that. The war, for me, was one of the main reasons. 9/11 and the war on terror is why I started really following politics. I was like, what is going on? And I spent years immersing myself in studying these things and trying to figure out what was going on. Eventually leading to this channel some, 20 years later. Anyway, backing up and reapproaching again the issue on the table. My basic position on the Democratic and Republican parties, aside from the fact that they're both totally controlled top to bottom, and I mean really down to the local level. Occasionally you slip something past one of them on the local level, but really down to the local level. Because you got to keep in mind, there are people who lust for power at every level, and every amount of success. So if there's people who can become a county commissioner and they're happy with that slot and that matches their education and aspirations and they just like being one of the people who are on the county commission of whatever, then that's what they're going to do, and they may do it for decades. If you really dig into local, county, state government, you find that these party machines, it's not just everyone wants to be president. There are people who just, they're in their city government, and I don't mean just paid officials or something like that. I mean really political people, partisan political people. They get in there, and that's their thing. And it is sewn up. It is sewn up. You would think, wow, that's such a small amount of power. Why would they care? Well, they do. So anyway, my basic take, aside from that, both of those parties are controlled by the 1% and they're borderline impenetrable, is that neither party offers a coherent political concept, ideology, or, understanding of society. I think that what they've done, and I don't know if this is, systematic or just something that evolved over time, but it's as if they took, some kind of a coherent humanistic approach to understanding life and kind of carved it up like a jigsaw puzzle and put half the pieces in one party and put half the pieces in the other party. It's impossible, completely impossible to form a coherent approach, understanding, philosophy of society with either of those worldviews. They're both toxic dead ends. For a while, the Democratic Party, most recently, the Democratic Party, there were inroads made by the labor movement, and so the Democratic Party was made for some period of time to, adopt something resembling a pro-working class platform, and there are still vestiges of that, but they are mostly ornamental at this point. Again, that carving up by the 1%, and just that total sabotaging by the 1% and, blockading of both parties by the 1% is pretty complete. So as far as the partisanship, yeah, that's definitely built into the system. They're fighting for a lot of the same things in the end because the 1% will not permit real change. They mostly just permit surface level change at most, while the real power relations remain intact. With that said, the Democratic Party tends to attract more people interested in change in general, and the Republican Party tends to attract more people who are vocal defenders of the status quo, the past, traditionalism, reactionary tendencies, etc. Across the board, religious fundamentalism, you name it. So that is, people trying to get involved in politics who aren't necessarily bourgeois, I'm saying those are the two poles that the base tends to get pulled towards, one or the other, based on those predilections. Whether or not the party lines up exactly with what they're thinking, or whether it offers an avenue for realizing those goals, or again, whether it offers, any kind of real coherency or consistency, that's another question, see point one. But we can say that each party has attracted a particular base and tends to express particular points of view. So, for the people for whom this system is real, they get invested in it, etc. To play devil's advocate here for a second, which I generally don't do, but trying to have some amount of compassion for these people, they're trying to fight for what they believe in. Some of them realize that the way that they're doing it is compromised. Some of them don't, or, to a different extent. But in my case, I want change. I think we need radical change in society right now. I think that the system we have is headed off a cliff. I think we need radical change and away from traditionalism, the status quo, etc. That means I personally, running the show, not playing devil's advocate, this is reality. I'm interested in change. I probably have a lot more in common with the people who get attracted to the Democratic Party, seeking that kind of change. I'm not a religious fundamentalist. I am not, a cultural traditionalist. I am somebody who wants a radical reinvention of society and the economic system that underpins it. So I can understand to some extent, people getting caught up, let's say, in the Democratic Party, who really want to defend what they're doing to the best of their ability. And of course, the party's working against you because it's owned by your mortal enemies. I wish more people would realize that. It's one of the messages that I harp on this channel constantly. But I can see, I understand you wouldn't want Trump to get credit for things because he's a Republican and because of all the other things that he stands for. I understand that. But my guess is I am going to wind up agreeing to some extent also with Kyle, where buying into this logic. I don't want to reduce it just to tribalism, though. I think that that's incorrect. It's not just tribe A and tribe B. There are fundamentally different things going on in each tribe, like with respect to class interests, at least among the people who get attracted to them and who they're standing up for. Of course, due to the 1% control of both parties end up working for the 1%. So trying to actually stand up for working class economic interests in either party is not going to work. However, it would be erroneous to say that, a lot of the working class Republicans, for example, who are avowed traditionalists and reactionaries, they think that the way to prosperity actually is, a rising tide lifts all boats. And we should support capitalism because if there's more profits, there'll be more wages. Like, completely misunderstanding the system. Whereas on the Democratic side, you do get people trying for change and just failing because that party is never going to serve you. All right. I think I made my point. I'm just trying to... I see Kyle getting real smug on this point a lot of the time. And I'd like to dilute that somewhat because I know that there are people, at least for me, I would speak more to the people who have been wrongly attracted to the Democratic Party, even though that, they have some of the same motivating drives that I have, just not having that understanding that the Democratic Party is not really going to do anything for you in the way that you want it to. Republicans, I don't think that there's a whole lot that can be done, or let's say there's a lot less, I think, that can be done with that base, who is probably, because of their complete misunderstanding of capitalism, and just how that relates to their own interest. Yes, are there working class Republicans? Absolutely. Can you convince these people that they shouldn't support the 1%? Different question. Would they benefit from socialism? Yeah. Can you convince them of that? Different question. All right, let's get back to Kyle.
It shows that partisan politics and tribalism is a mind virus, and it makes people irrational. But it's actually even worse among Republicans. So among Republicans, if you tell them a Republican wants to end a war, they are 25 points more likely to agree with it than if you tell a Republican that a Democratic president wants to end a war. So 16-point difference among Democratic voters, 25-point difference among Republican voters. So instead of just thinking of the issue as the issue, they think like, hey, what's my team saying on this? And whatever they're saying right now is the position that I'll adopt. Now, to be fair, the good news that comes out of this is it's still a majority of Americans in both polls.
Okay, so second to last comment here. This video is almost over. I want to step in here again because, Kyle has a point in the abstract, but I think that he is actually undervaluing and misrepresenting and maybe misunderstanding some of the logic at play. When people get involved in politics, it is not usually this kind of big brain utilitarian, just I'm solely a policy voter, etc. Because politics is a lot stickier than that, and people may be looking at political wins and losses more in terms of stock in their movement, which I would characterize differently than he has, as being different from just my team. Like, you have two football teams and they both play football and they both play it in basically the same way, but one team is better at some games and what I mean? Like, these aren't football teams. They are in some ways watered down, distortions of mass movements that people do make long-term, personal, ideological, financial, and other investments in. So in that sense, it's not entirely irrational to want your movement to score points rather than another movement, even if you agree with the, outcome in a particular case. When I say that politics is stickier, it's because, let's say there is a party you agree with on one issue and strongly disagree with on 9 out of 10 of, the top issues. So that party gains massive political capital by doing the one thing that's popular. Well, then they now have a lot more strength to do the majority of things you don't want them to do, that you're strongly opposed to. So I don't know that it's entirely irrational, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Yes, I think that for the 1%ers and for the rich people who win no matter what, the stakes are much lower, whether Democrats win or Republicans win. And yes, you can definitely see a lot of mindless team spirit there. But to call it 100% irrational, I think, again, is discounting or downplaying people's political calculations. When you get involved with a movement, you really want that movement to succeed. And when you talk to people about why they become involved in politics, it can be really personal. I mean, sometimes people just vote a particular way because they are kind of mindless and, my family voted Republican and I don't engage in critical thinking at all, so I just vote Republican because, quote, we're a Republican family, or something like that. Or, everyone in my hometown votes Republican and I'm afraid of standing out or thinking for myself, therefore I do too, etc. But sometimes people, particularly people who tend to be, the most involved activists, will have like a really pronounced personal story about why they started to care. And for those people, again, is it 100% irrational? Neither party is an anti-war party to talk about this particular issue. I'm going to go a step further and say most Americans don't fucking care about people in Afghanistan. They're not real to most people in America. They live in a completely different style and situation than people in the USA live. And I'm not endorsing this view. Like I said, being anti-war was the reason I became involved in politics almost 20 years ago. But I think that most people in the US could give less than a shit about people in Afghanistan. They don't really care whether the US gets out of Afghanistan or not. That's just a hard truth, that people in the USA don't fucking give a shit, and they don't have solidarity with other people suffering around the world because of imperialism. That's just a fact. And that's the way the 1% wants it. Then they don't have resistance to imperialism going on domestically, which is key. I mean, you read anything from 20th century socialists, and anti-war, anti-imperialist, pro-revolutionary morale and sentiment within first world imperialist countries is key for somewhat restraining those imperialist governments from going and attacking, say, the Soviet Union or Vietnam or Cuba or China, etc., which, again, the U.S. is trying, also with all their little pseudo-left people out there, trying to gin up a new Cold War and drive a wedge between working people in the USA and working people in China, who stand to gain a lot more from cooperation than they do from a new Cold War. So, I don't know. I guess I get the point of, like, we should all be big brain, cold calculating policy voters. That isn't entirely how movements work. And again, looking at the Trump phenomenon in particular, which is relevant here because you're talking about Trump plans versus Biden plans. I mean, the MAGA people, it may have been a fascist movement, but it was a movement. And they played politics about protecting their movement. And they want to come back in 22. And they want to come back in 24. And they don't give a shit about the people in Afghanistan. Of course they don't. They just care about winning. They care about power. And, their brand is this kind of paleo-con non-interventionism when it suits them, because, of course, we know capitalism needs interventionism. Well, imperialism is the more accurate term for it. Capitalism from the 20th century on can't exist in a non-imperialistic form. This is another problem, again, going back to the beginning of this video with all the pro-Scandinavia people. Not to single out Scandinavia, but the point is that imperialism, the U.S. may be the main muscle and military might, but, stocks are traded globally, capitalism is global, imperialism is global, and, even the Scandinavian countries and whatever other social democratic paradise you particularly long after, it's hooked into that system, and it's benefiting from that system, and it's gaining wealth from that plunder. All right, let's finish off Kyle here.
Wants to get out of Afghanistan. So the good news is, no matter what, it's a majority. But the bad news is, you really see, the partisan brainworms take over, even when it comes to issues as dire and devastating and serious as life and death and war. And that's upsetting, man. That's really depressing to me. That's really depressing. So I urge all of you, and I don't think I need to say this because I think most of the people in my audience already do this, but I urge all of you, for the love of God, think about the issues on their own merit. Don't, look to whoever you view as a leader on your team to guide you. You can think for yourself. You have your own morals. You have your own ethics. You have your own internal compass. And if somebody who you otherwise dislike or somebody who's part of the other team does something good, you can admit it. That's called intellectual honesty. That's called having principles. And unfortunately, so many people who are involved in politics don't think about this stuff that way. And it really, really drives me crazy. But again, I guess the positive takeaway is, no matter what, it's a majority that wants to get out of Afghanistan. It's just that the numbers change quite a bit simply based on partisan politics.
So closing comments, I'll agree with Kyle that it's a good thing that a majority of people in the USA don't think that the U.S. military should be in Afghanistan. I think It never should have gone in the first place. And the entire war on terror is flat out bullshit. It was a war for oil and minerals. It's a basic imperialist war under the pretext of a totally concocted threat of terrorism against the United States. Pure bullshit from the start. Yet here we are 20 years later, taking polls on, what do people think about the U.S. staying in Afghanistan or the U.S. military pulling out of Afghanistan? Like, I don't know. It's been 20 years. Never should have gotten in the first place. But this is like across the board. So for Kyle's thing of, even if people you completely despise and who are 90%, trying their hardest to oppose and bring down what you believe in, like your core values, they want to stand in opposition to that, then, be happy when they propose something that you do like, even though they'll probably just take that political capital and use it for something that, you absolutely hate. And that will probably be the net result. I don't think that's as, again, irrational as he's making it out to be. That said, most people don't buy into the system in the first place. More people are unaffiliated than are affiliated with the Democratic Party, and more people are unaffiliated than are affiliated with the Republican Party. Most people have rejected both parties. And yeah, people who are in it, it's real to them, and we can say that, if they're fighting for the 1%, good job, they're in the right place. Of course, we don't want them to do that. Most people are not the 1% by definition, and they shouldn't fight for the 1%. But if you're fighting against the 1%, you're definitely in the wrong place, and hopefully you are fighting against the 1%. So I guess this thing of just, give credit where credit's due, even when horrible people do things you like, even though it's going to probably strengthen them, be happy. I don't know. I think my conclusion here is that Kyle is taking the entire political system too much at face value, Democrats and Republicans alike. I think that this is very typical also of social democrats who really think, oh, we just need better Democrats in there. Not we need to change the entire system, etc. They tend to really focus on electoral politics, and, you get all these wacky big brain takes and approaches to it. But really, you're never going to do anything substantial with this system anyway. So if we really want to talk about political goals and what we want, the other issue that hasn't even come up so far, but that this is basically standing just adjacent to, is that when right-wingers, and that can be in either party, Democrats are full of right-wingers, when they do something, even if it seems like you like it, read the fine print, because usually they're doing it for the wrong reasons or to make way for something worse. Hey, what if they pull out of Afghanistan just to fucking do another 9/11 and then launch a bigger war? So I don't really support anything they do. You know what I mean? You got to not take the system at face value and be skeptical of the whole thing. So what have I said in this video? It may seem contradictory. It's not. I want to have compassion for some of the people who, are fighting, they think, for something real, and that I might even in principle agree with. But they're locked into an illusion that, is never going to serve any of us in the working class. If you are interested in change, get the hell out of the Democratic Party, and we need an independent left. That's my basic message on that point. As for the rest of this, I'm not somebody, I've seen some wild takes, like, the Republican Party is going to become the new vanguard of the working class. Get out of here. No, it isn't. Have you ever actually seen the Republican Party? Just no, it won't. It's sad to me that even needs to be said, but this is the level of fucking insanity going on in the U.S. today. So, anyway, I'm a socialist. Kyle's a social democrat. To some extent, we disagree on principle, to some extent, we disagree on method. And the critiques are not always, a baseball bat to the head. In this case, as often is the case, there's agreement and there's disagreement. But I hope that you watching have at least had some thought stimulated by all of this. And, hopefully by engaging in this kind of thought and introspection, we can gain more class consciousness and self-awareness and correct things we're doing that aren't effective and reorient ourselves towards things that are more constructive and will actually allow us to act in pursuit of our own real interests. With that, thanks for watching. Thanks to the current patrons whose names are on the screen. If you'd like to get your name on the screen, head to patreon.com/socialism for all. You can sign up for as little as $2 a month. Otherwise, if you can like, share, comment, and subscribe, that also helps. Whatever you do, thanks for doing it, and we'll catch you in the next video.